If you're ready, I'll share with you the dark secret of a cold world. Everything was buried in ice, but most of all, human history. Tens of thousands of years ago, Earth entered a period when survival was nearly impossible. The cold was merciless, winds howled like screams across the steppes, and even the sky lost its colors. This era was not only a struggle against nature, but also a time when humans battled the darkness within themselves. Perhaps the darkest period that witnessed the worst painful experiences, the Ice Age. The Ice Age, imagine, no fire, primitive shelters, food hard to come by. The most vulnerable were the children. But this story isn't just about survival. This story is about children who were consumed. Yes, you heard that right. Thousands of years ago, some communities didn't just kill their children, they may have eaten them, or they literally ate them. Come now, let me tell you all together the dark secrets of these events. Today we'll present you with the scientific evidence, archaeological findings, and anthropological theories behind this horrifying possibility. Some rituals are so strange, terrifying, and thought-provoking that they challenge the modern human imagination, but don't panic. This is our past, and we shouldn't fear human history but learn from it. So why would a human being, especially a parent, ritually kill their own child, even come to the point of eating them? We'll find the answers to these questions together. In recent years, excavations conducted in various parts of the world have uncovered bone remains from the Ice Age. But some remains were different: cut marks, fractures, and some bones that appeared to have been boiled. Did these belong only to animals? Unfortunately, no. Some belonged to children. Worse yet, some of these bones showed deliberate cutting and cooking marks. Or could it be that the children born were already dying from the cold as soon as they were born, and adults saw them as a food or nutritional necessity? The question that needs to be asked in this case is, was this out of necessity, the last resort of a starving community trying to survive, or was it something much darker, a ritual? To find the answer to this, we're traveling to Spain. There are some stories that aren't just told, they're felt. And if this journey catches you somehow, remember, those who track in the darkness need to find each other. If you want to leave a mark at the end of the road, you can sign history by leaving a trace or a word in the comments section. A cave in Spain, inside it, a campsite from 12,000 years ago. A tiny hip bone, found during excavations, belonging to a modern human, a child. But this bone wasn't left after a natural death. It was deliberately separated, carved, covered in scratches. Next to it, fireplace remains. Moreover, there are traces of exposure to high heat on the bone, a shocking picture. But couldn't it have been unable to get out of the cave, or tent, or whatever it was as a result of a fire? Another example in Siberia. In the ruins of an ancient village that emerged with the melting of glaciers, skeletons belonging to children were found scattered in a remarkable way. The bones were arranged as if ceremonially. Stone masks were placed among them. Was this a cannibalism ceremony or a spiritual belief in rebirth? Here's where the real event is, if you noticed. I said the bones were arranged as if ceremonially. In this video, we won't just tell you shocking stories. We'll talk about facts or those with a high probability of existence. We'll also delve into the origins of these rituals. Why did such practices develop? What conditions drove people to such terrible decisions? And perhaps most crucially, could these behaviors still be happening somewhere today? While scientists, anthropologists, and even psychologists search for answers to these questions, we'll present you with all the findings, all the assumptions, and all the dark possibilities. Are you ready? Because now we're beginning to discover a truth buried under the ice, where bones whisper a reality that history has forgotten. The Ice Age wasn't just cold, it was also dark. To understand the Ice Age, we first need to know the world of humans of that period. This era, when average temperatures reached -20 degrees Celsius, froze not only the body, but also the human mind. Hunting seasons were short, food sources limited, and predators were a constant threat of death, because it wasn't just humans giving a struggle for survival. Animals were too. Resources were limited for humans and for animals as well. In this geography, children weren't always a burden, but perhaps they were the most fragile ones. Actually, this was the case in every period anyway. Let's return to our main topic. According to archaeologists, ceremonial deaths among Ice Age humans, especially certain ritualistic practices, applied to children, were surprisingly common. But should these practices be explained by hunger, that is, forced cannibalism, or were these much more systematic and symbolic rituals? I'll talk about 3 places and events for you to decide their answers. England, Gough Cave. In this cave, a skull belonging to a child was found during excavations. But this wasn't an ordinary remains. The skull was carefully hollowed out. The jaw section was skillfully separated. Researchers suggested that this remains wasn't just a corpse, but might have been used as a vessel. Was blood carried in it? Was it prepared for a spiritual ceremony? Spain, El Sidrón cave here. Bones belonging to 12 Neanderthals were found. Among them were 2 children. Most of the bones were fragmented, open to their inner marrow. These traces show that humans broke the bones systematically to consume the marrow, not just because they were hungry, but within a certain order. And this behavior was regular, systematic, not random. Andes Mountains, South America, towards the end of the Ice Age, some indigenous peoples left children alive on the mountains. The bodies were found frozen. High levels of cocaine and alcohol traces were found in the hair of the dead children. This showed that the children were ceremonially drugged and sacrificed. Why? So that the gods would end the drought or to prevent a disaster from returning. Throughout history, every civilization has faced its own darkness. And at the center of this darkness, children were often present. As much as archaeological findings, mythological narratives also carry echoes of these horrifying rituals. So much so that the theme of sacrificed child resonates both in Mesopotamian clay tablets and in Scandinavian sagas. Come on, let's look at these experienced events and their causes together. In Sumerian and Babylonian texts, it's told that young individuals were sacrificed to appease the wrath of the gods. In some stories, it's stated that disasters like floods or droughts only ended when firstborn children were offered to the gods. Are these narratives real or symbolic? Archaeologists confirm that child skeletons have been found around some ziggurat ruins, bones buried on top of each other in sacrifice pits. This wasn't just a legend, it was the physical trace of a practice. When frozen child mummies were found at the peaks of the Andes Mountains, the scientific world was shaken. These children weren't just dead, they were in ceremonial clothing, drugged with sacred plants, carefully prepared. In Inca mythology, children offered to the gods were considered pure souls. It was believed that the soul of the sacrificed child would unite with the spirit of the mountain. This practice is known as Capacocha. Think about it. A people living at the foot of the mountain would surrender their most valuable possessions, their children, to stop disaster. Well, is it over? No, it's not over. There are many more examples like this. Let me tell you one more because it seems like there won't be enough time for the others. In Phoenician mythology, child sacrifices were at the center of offerings made to the god Moloch. Ancient writers tell that living children were placed inside giant metal statues and burned in fire as offerings to this god. If you notice, they're not burned directly, they're put inside a giant metal statue and wait in the fire. Well, if this is a ritual, how pleased can the god be with this? Here's an example of our dark past traces for you. Let's move on to the next topic. Are these narratives or evidence, myths or reality? Are these stories just fairy tales? Or are they reflections of traumatic rituals that echo in humanity's collective memory? Psychologists argue that some myths are actually mythologized forms of rituals that were actually experienced. In this case, child cannibalism or ritual sacrifices in the Ice Age may have later seeped into mythology, and humanity may have chosen to transmit its own fears through these stories. But there is evidence found. What will we do with them? We can't throw them in a corner, right? According to evolutionary psychologists, humans have sometimes pushed moral boundaries to survive in extreme conditions. But eating children, this is beyond those boundaries. That's when cultural beliefs come into play. In many archaic societies, children were seen as special beings, purity, closeness to gods, a means of establishing a divine connection when sacrificed. In some cultures, children's flesh was considered the purest gift offered to the gods. This situation speaks to us of cannibalism arising not just from hunger but from beliefs. Looking at the past, we all have dark secrets and series of unsolvable events in our ancestors. In this mindset, sacrificing a child was a tool to maintain balance with both nature and the gods. The sacrificed child would become a hero. His soul would bring luck to his tribe, drive away disaster. They believed in this. Let's also look at the evolution of rituals. Magic, belief, and fear. Many anthropologists say that these rituals are related not only to food shortage, but also to the collapse of social structures. In difficult conditions, communities use the idea of sacrifice to maintain order. This is a kind of expression of fear management and collective trauma. Here we see what fear does to people. Over time, these rituals became stereotyped, became narratives, perhaps turned into myths. What seems terrible to us today was sacred to them. But what if such conditions occur again one day? This would be a situation that no one would want, but were some people still loyal to these beliefs? Czech Republic, Dolní Věstonice here. 3 individuals buried on top of each other were found. One was a child. The arrangement of the bones pointed to a ceremony-like arrangement. Researchers detected deliberate crushing in the skull of the child's body. Suspicions focused on one point: sacrifice ceremony. France, Gough Cave. In this cave, dating back about 100,000 years, traces of human flesh consumption were detected in the remains of 7 individuals. One of them belonged to a child. The fact that especially the arm and leg bones were broken and their inner marrow was taken revealed that a planned cannibalism was practiced here. But this wasn't just physical hunger. In the same cave, there were painted symbols on the cave walls, fingerprints left by a child's hands, like a signature left while running away in fear. This wasn't just death. It was the ritual of fear, or traces of fear. Let's also look at the scientific debates that science wonders about: necessity or belief. A group of scientists argues that these practices belonged only to famine periods. That is, they say they had no other choice but to survive. However, an opposing group draws attention to the fact that many remains were found in areas with quite rich food sources. In this case, the question changes: if they're not hungry, why did they sacrifice their children? Some academics think that these practices were a sociological balance tool. Deliberate fear performances done to reduce population, create fear, or show the power of leadership. Perhaps these rituals were part of intra-tribal control systems. Historian Professor Laura Hammond says, when humanity becomes helpless against the unknown, it creates gods. And when those gods are not satisfied, it gives sacrifices. And I think this has been the case in every period. We can say in the Ice Age, Middle Ages, or every age. Today, child sacrifice cases are still being reported in various parts of the world. These are usually based on ritualistic justifications, such as magic purposes, abundance belief, or breaking curses. In some tribes of Africa, in some isolated sects in India, and even in mountain villages of Latin America, this situation is not exactly the same as Ice Age rituals, of course, but human ritual-bound nature is still alive. Perhaps the tools have changed, but the belief patterns are similar. We must pay a price. Only then will nature forgive us. Don't forget that nature always forgives us, but as I said, we must pay the price. These are not just perverted practices of the past. The impulse to respond with blood to unexplainable events may still be living in the shadows somewhere within us. Let's ask these questions. What's left? What emerged from the excavations wasn't just bones. It's also a story that pushes the limits of humanity. These remains represent not only dead bodies but also the decisions of the survivors. And perhaps most of all, it tells us this: humans can surrender not only to nature but also to their own darkness. Every documentary you watch, every historical narrative offers you information, but some hit you like a wall, because that information shows not only what happened in the past, but also what could potentially happen again. These may also contain information that will enlighten our darkness. The children of the Ice Age were not just sacrifices, they are also awakening signals that echo in humanity's dark memory. They illuminated humanity with their fire perhaps, but with a bad experience. But in our videos, we will tell not only the good or the bad, but everyone. History tells not only the winners, but also the victims. Sometimes those stories echo even centuries later. Under the frozen soil of the Ice Age, there were once tiny steps, children's laughter, toys made of stones, perhaps eyes trembling with fear, but then something happened. Those steps stopped. The laughter fell silent, and those children could now only speak with their bones. Isn't it really terrible, don't you think? Whatever archaeology tells us, We will never fully know what happened in that period, but the remains offer us a panorama of humanity. There's hope in it, there's desperation, there's fear, and yes, there's darkness too. Human history began not with writing but with action. Although the rituals of the Ice Age seem horrifying to us today, they had meaning for the people of that time. Those children were part of a ritual. Perhaps they were sacrificed to gods, perhaps to nature, perhaps just to hope. But we cannot escape this question. Actually, we cannot escape anything. If the same conditions existed today, what would we do? Would we protect our faith, our humanity, or would we surrender to our own darkness? History is not just events that happened in the past. It's also scenarios that have the potential to be relived. And we must be the narrators of these scenarios that shine light against darkness. If you look at history, nature has always repeated this cycle, but now it seems like humanity, not nature, will prepare this end. Now I ask you, what about you? If nature loses its balance again one day, and you have to choose between surviving and remaining human, which would you choose? Today we walked on bones. We listened to whispers hidden among the ashes of old fires. We listened to the silenced voices of children in the shadows of the Ice Age. Perhaps there are still many unheard voices, many unsolved secrets. I won't say maybe they exist even today, but remember, history doesn't remain silent. It just waits patiently. And as long as we continue to listen to it, the darkness of the past offers us not only knowledge, but also wisdom. If this narrative affected you, don't forget to subscribe and share the video to show support, because this channel tells not only information but human stories. In the next video, we'll go even deeper.